All right, welcome to another video here where I'm going to be putting together a modular set created inside of Maya. Now, the idea here is that I'm going to be basing this off the University of Chicago's news office and medical center. Now, I'm not choosing this because it is a particularly prominent building, but it's actually the genericness of this building. The idea is that I would like to create a modular set that would allow me to create more than one building. And so looking at this building, I can kind of see that I might be able to create things like police stations, fire halls, and schools, all kind of from this generic building. And that's kind of the idea. Now, my first step here is I've obviously brought this image inside of Photoshop. And the first thing that I would like to do is I would like to kind of try and identify some of the more unique pieces in this building. So while the building in itself is kind of all one big solid object, there are repetitions in design and shape that occur. And it's some of those things that I would like to identify. This is going to make it easier for me to know what to create inside of 3D in order to be able to reproduce a building of this style. Now, I'm not going to try and reproduce this building one-to-one. It's more about just trying to capture the feel of this building. I also want to point out that this is not going to be completed assets, but something more akin to a proxy mesh or something that would be used for prototyping inside of a game engine. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. So as I mentioned, I've got this inside of Photoshop and I've gone and created a new layer. Now what I'm going to do with this layer is I'm going to set it to be an overlay just so that I can see through it, and I'll turn its opacity down a little bit. And the idea is that I would like to start identifying unique segments to this building. Now, unique segments are areas where I can see repetition. It is an area where I can see this part of the building in multiple different places. So one of the first ones that jumps out to me, I'm going to go pick a color here since this building is primarily blue or red. I'm going to go into the blue spectrum here, and I'm going to go into my brush tool, and I'm going to go. Let's make sure the hardness is turned up, and I'm just going to go and identify this column right here. In fact, we'll go right down to the ground, and so this column here is a unique piece. I can see it being reused several times. We're just going to go fill this in with purple here. I can see this existing in several different locations on this building. It's also going to include this top little bit up here too. So this little thing, and we'll go and turn maybe the opacity up a little bit more. So this little column here, if I were to look at other places in the building where this exists, I can see that it straddles the first and second floor and ends a little bit into the third floor. And there also appear to be stairs going up, so we can actually see the basement windows here at the bottom. So this is a quite tall piece. And I can see that there's another one here, another one here, another one here, and another one here. And the fact that last one seems to be pretty close to the edge of the building, I would wager that there is a corner not unlike this one just past it. If I look along the other side of the building, I can also see that they repeat over here in much the same way. Again, with probably another one in behind here. I'm not entirely sure because I can't see there, but it looks like they repeat here. Also, if I look at the top of the building, I can see that there are smaller versions of these up along this top floor. Now, since these smaller versions are not the completed version of this one, they're not in its entirety, that means what I'll be able to do is create the larger version that exists here. And then from that, I will create the smaller versions by cloning it and chopping it off. So that is one unique piece that I can see here. From this, I'll be able to generate two separate meshes. If we go look at some other unique meshes here, let's go pick another color. I can see that there are windows along the first floor and windows along the second floor, or the basement floor here rather. And the basement windows are what look like privacy glass with a rounded arch top. And then the first floor windows appear to be quite tall with a split in the middle and then a little window pane above. These appear to be the same windows on the second floor, third floor, and fourth floor. There may be some difference in height. It looks like maybe the ones up on the 4th floor are a little bit shorter, but the rest of them all appear to be exactly the same. This means that I can actually reproduce these windows as a unique piece. Now, there are 3 of them within this section of wall. And if I go look over here, I can see that those same windows exist here. Now, looking at this, I can see that if we use this section as our unique piece of window, and we'll go and try to identify this here. I'm going to try and split this maybe right at where the floor changes. So from there and across, I think I'll change my render layer here so that we can see this a little bit clearer. Let's get out of overlay and let's do a multiply, or perhaps let's do multiply, and I'll turn the opacity back up here. So that's what's going on. My brush is not at full opacity. There we go. So yeah, so if we go and look at this here, this section here, this is what I'm going to use to create my second piece. Now again, I can see that repeating in other places of the other places of the building here. It doesn't look like it's going to be able to repeat over here. If I look here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows along that section. So this is actually a separate unique piece. It will then repeat back here, and it won't repeat up here either. If I look at this piece is going to end with a piece of trim along the bottom. That means that this section of window is also going to be unique. If we go above, I can see that here, this is going to be the same, again, piece as it goes down to the window and go up here. And then again, that same kind of lip up above before going into what is a decorative trim. So this is yet another unique piece, this blue piece here. So these are going to be the same, and this one needs to be a separate piece. So I've got 2 different chunks of wall here. So I'll go and choose another color. And we can go identify this wall, which is going to start at trim, essentially end where this wall ends, and fill in this section. So that's going to make our lives pretty easy because these sections, while similar, are still different. So there's yet another piece there. Again, I can use this same technique over here to create that section. And then again, these 2 areas are going to be blue. Now, if I look at where these areas end, they end right flush with the window. That means that there might be some brick going in behind this column. In fact, it might be smart to bring the brick out halfway up the column, like this. And the reason for that is that we would be able to then place the column on top. That also means that this piece here will also have that same thickness on either side of it, since this is going to be the same mesh in a different location. So if this is that same blue mesh here, which is good, we'll be able to reuse that geometry there. And same deal here, and same deal here with the green. So again, that green will come out as well, as will, right? So we'll take that green to here and up. And again, it probably makes the most sense here to end this in a place that logically will fit with our building. So if I do this kind of thing, I can kind of identify where these unique pieces are going to go. And this is the idea, is that I want to kind of find as many of these unique pieces. Now, I've identified 3 in terms of doing this. And I would probably want to spend a good 15-20 minutes here doing this so I can actually kind of see exactly where my unique pieces are and how they fit together. So I'm going to go and just, instead of filling them in on the image like this, what I'm going to do is pause the video here while I go and paint them in so that I can identify them for myself. Okay. So I've gone through now and added quite a few colors here to identify some of the unique sections and also to identify some of the occurring pieces on this model. Now I've gone and colored in just essentially the corner and some of the front facade here, but that has given me a good chunk of unique pieces that I can go and start with. Now, some of the things that I have not yet gone and highlighted are things like the entranceway and the doorway and some of the steps here, things that I absolutely will need. But at this point, I have enough that I can kind of get a jump on this and get started on some of the creation. Now, I'm going to go in and let's see, make sure I'm on my brush tool here. I'm just going to go make sure that I fully color in some of this stuff here. Now, it's not absolutely necessary that you do this kind of thing when you're creating a modular set. You know, a lot of people will just kind of wing it. I like to base these things off of real buildings because my knowledge of architecture is not so great, and this helps me, keep at least the kind of theme and look of a building pretty consistent. Again, I can always go in, add to this down the road. If I find that my buildings are all looking too similar, I could always actually go and use the other University of Chicago building here in the background and begin a whole new modular set with that I can then interchange these pieces. But for now, this is going to do. So the first thing that I want to do here is also kind of set up some units in terms of scaling. Now, this is going to be important because when you do a modular set, when you model for modularity, you need to ensure that all of your 3D geometry pieces, all of your assets can snap together like Lego. If we have a continuity error in the height of the second story, so here where I've got green and orange and purple, I'm going to need to make sure that the height of each of these meshes is identical if I'm going to be able to snap them together and continue to make another story above. I also need to make sure that they're going to be identical in laying on the 0 plane so that I'll be able to snap them to another story below. So that part is going to be really, really, really important. Now, there's some areas of this that I did not color, and I want to kind of explain those a little bit. First, I didn't color inside this area here next to the little windows we've got on the 3rd floor and this column that I've designated as part of the front. The reason for that is that I'm going to use this corner piece to fill in that gap. So right here is going to be the same piece that is here. Now, this piece obviously is going to extend to the corner and loop around the corner. And what that means is that in behind this piece here, this mesh will continue a little bit and then go inside the building. Now, the only reason that I'm okay with that is that I'm not creating an internal structure for this building. Inside of my game, this is not a building that the character will be able to enter. Therefore, having some of the building internal like that is going to be fine. No one will ever notice. So this is going to be the same thing all the way down. I will copy this orange piece and place it here, and I will actually make a duplicate of this amber piece here, and I'll place it over there as well, running behind that entire center facade. Now, again, you do want to kind of plan for this when you do this to make sure that everything is going to work. I also didn't highlight this edge here, which is a continuation of the molding here, and the reason for that is that I'm simply going to take this molding and reproduce it here. Now, where I've got this division line, it appears that I'm only going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these little outcroppings. And on this one, it looks like there are 5. And so that means that it's actually going to be a little bit larger than this one. And that's going to be based off the width of this. Now, in terms of the dimensions here that I'm going to be using centimeters as a means of identifying the scale of things. So every unit inside of Maya will have a corresponding centimeter unit of measurement, and they will be 1 to 1. So 1 unit inside of Maya will equal 1 centimeter in our game engine. I'm going to go and start plotting out how tall I want some of these things to be, and I'm kind of using some of the architecture here as a identifier for that. Now, I'm not going to be super crazy accurate with this and try and measure the building, in reality. I just need to get close enough that it's going to work. And so I can actually see over here that this is the door and that there are some steps going up. So this, to me, this door is 2 meters in height, which is 200 centimeters. And so that means that I could probably use that same unit of measurement, if not a little bit more, right here. So if that's 200 to go from the top of the door to the bottom of the door, it looks like maybe 250 would be a pretty good measurement here. I will make, and again, this is the same pieces here, so this will also be 250. And this piece here will also be 250, so that my third story is also the same height as my first and third stories. So that means that the height of one story, so one story, is going to be equal to 250 centimeters. That gives me some units inside of Maya that I can play with. Now I can actually kind of use the image here to kind of figure out how wide these things are going to be. And this one is less important, again, because I'm not trying to recreate this building precisely, but use it as kind of a template for the building that I want to make. That means that the width of these pieces is going to be a lot more ambiguous. It's going to be something that I can kind of play with. Now I can see that it is almost square through here, so I might end up somewhere near 250. But all of this is also going to depend on how I make these pieces fit together. And so I'm going to use that 250 as a starting point and go from there. I'm also going to make this lower story, which is part of the basement and actually disappears underground. I'm going to make this the height of the door, which is 200 centimeters. So our basement is going to be equal to 200 centimeters. And this gives us the ability to, again, make a little bit of variation in the building so everything is not exactly the same height, and still make it look kind of interesting and accurate. And I'll probably do that same measurement up here, where this looks to be a little bit smaller than an actual story, and I'll kind of put them together. The trim here doesn't matter quite so much, and in fact I would say that probably the combined height of this fourth story and the trim should be the height of one story. So maybe we do 50 centimeters for the trim and 200 meters for the window itself. With that done, I can actually start jumping into Maya and creating some of these pieces here. So I'm going to start pretty simply. I'm going to start with maybe this green piece here. That is it's one of the simplest pieces I see, and we'll build as much out of that one piece as possible. So from this green piece, I should be able to create the blue ones, the green one, the orange one, the purple one, and this pink one. So that's going to give us a whole slew of pieces here, even this pale blue one up here, all out of one mesh. So by kind of spending some time and doing one model fairly decent, we'll end up being able to generate a lot of this building from that. I'm going to move Photoshop over to my other monitor, and I'm going to do this so that I can actually keep an eye on this image as I go in, create my model inside of Maya. Now I'll pull it back over when there's something I need to identify so that I can point out anything that is changing as I go. But this will be a pretty decent way of being able to keep track of what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So here I am in Maya, and I have not yet created anything. And because we're not doing an internal structure for this building, we are doing an exterior facade only. That's going to simplify just how much 3D modeling I'm going to need to have to do. To begin with, I'm going to ensure that Maya is in the modeling template for the UI, making sure that this drop down in the corner is set to modeling so that we have access to the menu structure for modeling. I'm also going to ensure that on the shelf, we see the modeling tools. These are noted by the Poly Modeling tab and consist of a whole bunch of orange buttons here. Next, on the right, I'm going to ensure that we are currently in the modeling toolkit. This gives us access to most of the tools that we're going to be using while doing this. To begin with, I'm going to create a plane. When I click on the plane tab, a plane will get generated at the center of the world using the default template that Maya has for all 3D geometry, in this case for 3D planes. If I head over to our channel box, we can see that there is no information in translate, rotate, and scale is set to 1. If we head into the attribute panel, we can see the construction defaults for this object. I'm going to leave the shape and enter the polyplane tab. This gives us our default construction for this object. By default, Maya created a 1 unit by 1 unit plane. This means that this plane is only a centimeter by 1 centimeter. Not exactly what we were after. It also subdivided it into 10 equal polygons along its width and its height. Also, not what we want. So I'm going to go make changes to this in order to make it fit a little bit more accurately what I'm after. First, we know that the width is going to be 250 and the height is going to be 250. This is going to give us a square plane that matches the proportions of that first window. Now again, I'm going to elongate it a little bit. I don't think that 250 here works very well. It's a little too square. Let's try 300. That looks a little bit better for what I want to do. Next, I'm going to go and remove all but one segment of our geometry. I don't need all of those additional polygons, and I will go and generate any details that I need. With that done, we have our first building plate done, and we can start to go manipulate it now to make it fit the design of what we're after. I'm going to hit E on the keyboard to enter the rotation tool. I can also select it from the toolbar on the left. I'm going to hold J on my keyboard, which is going to enable this object to snap as I rotate it. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that it is standing vertically. This, again, will match a little bit more accurately the building. Now, most important is when we start snapping these objects together, we need to know where the corners are. The corners are the pieces that are going to fit together. And as of right now, they're not anywhere really significant. They are essentially the width and height of this object divided by 2. And so that's not really going to work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter vertex mode and select all of my vertices. And up in the toolbar, I'm going to go and find the area that says snap to grid. It's a little magnet with a little grid on it. And the idea is that I would like to grab the bottom vertex here. Make sure we have them all selected. And I'm going to middle mouse drag with that vertex to try and snap it on the grid. Now it's trying to snap to our home grid here. So maybe we'll do this in a little bit of a different way. I'm going to undo. Let's turn off that snap. And what I'm going to do instead is grab the bottom vertices and I will use the type and transform to go and set their position. In this case, 0. Then I'll set the height of the top ones to 250. And that has now shifted our plane upwards to match. I will grab the vertices on the right and I will set their X position to 0. And the ones on the left, I'll type in -300. And now what this has done is it has shifted and moved our plane over so that the very center bottom vertex is at 0, 0. When this object gets exported and placed into a game engine, 0, 0, 0 is where the game engine will place the pivot point for this object. This means that we will be able to snap other objects to this point. The next thing that I want to do is actually go and create some of the details herein. We have just a single facade here, which is not going to work. So I'm going to grab the 2 side edges. Actually, let's do this with the face. I'm going to grab the face. I'm going to use the extrude button. And in the tool that pops open, I'm going to use the offset while holding control. And I will drag this until we get something that's a little bit closer to the shape of the windows that we're after. So they look to be about here. Now, we're getting some flickering here, and this is as a result of Z-fighting. This means that there is both thickness on this plane that reads 0. That's not going to work, and so we're going to need to remove that face in the back and ensure that we only have 5 faces on the geometry here. If I go and look, there are currently 5 faces when I select it all. So this is going to serve as the inset that is going to become our windows. Now, I didn't go and look at the height of this object. I did this very arbitrarily. And if I were to go and select these 2 vertices here and go to move, we can see that their Y position is at 208.27. That's probably bad. We would want to, especially if we were going to be creating a unique set of windows that we could put inside this wall, we would want to make sure that this is at a height that can be reproduced when we create the windows. 208.27 is not exact enough. Neither is 41.73. The same is also happening in the X position. But since I'm not going to be creating a unique set of windows that I'm going to be placing into this wall, I'm going to merely model the windows into the wall. It's not really necessary to adjust these values. So let me take this face. Using extrude, I will go and grab the Z arrow and I will push it in so that we now have an inset into where our windows are going to be. After that, I will grab all of the horizontal edges. These are the ones that run left and right. I'm just going to marquee through the model to do this. I'm going to go to the connect section. And since I want to create 3 equally spaced windows here, with segments selected, I can middle mouse click and drag to the right to create 2 new edges. When pleased, I will hit enter to accept. I will return to faces and I will grab each of the new 3 windows, and using extrude and offset, we will see about creating these things a little bit smaller. Now, it doesn't look like this is going to work here. So I'm going to go to keep faces together and turn that off. Now, if I use offset, each face will get smaller on its own. Again, I will hit enter to accept, and I will switch to extrude again, and I can push these windows back a little bit further. This is going to give us the appearance of some windows in this geometry. In the reference image, there is also a separation between the top half and the bottom half of the window. Now, instead of modeling this into the geometry, which will actually start getting pretty expensive in terms of the number of edges we have, I'm going to add a new piece of geometry in here to do this for me. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to try and make things a little bit easier on the eyes. I'm going to head into my Lambert material group, and I'm going to darken the color of this model so that there's a higher contrast between the geometry and the wireframe, making it a little bit easier to see. Now, we do have some wasted topology here. We have some vertices and some edges and some faces that are not contributing to the shape of this model. What I mean by that is that this vertex here, if I move it along this edge, you can see that the model doesn't change. That means that this vertex is not contributing to the shape of this model and must be removed. I'm going to head over to Target Weld, and I will click on that vertex, and I will drag it to the corner. This will weld it to the target that I've chosen, and we'll clean up that outer section of the model. The same thing exists inside the first lip of the window, and I can go and move those over as well. When I've completed this, I'm going to turn off Target Weld and just ensure that I haven't made a mess of anything. That looks pretty good. Let's go and create that separation in these windows. To do that, I'm going to need to create another piece of geometry. I will head and hit the box button, This has created a cube at the center of the world. I'm going to move the cube up into the middle of our window. Now, since we know that this window is 300 units across, I know that I have to put this at negative 150 in X to center it in the window. I'm going to move it back, and we can actually find out exactly how far back it needs to be by selecting two vertices like this. So these two vertices make up the width of the depth of our window. And if I go and look at their position, in this case in Z, I get negative 18.25. This means that if I grab our cube and set it at the same depth, negative 18.25, this thing is now actually placed exactly where those are. Now I'll use scale to scale it up. And I want to get it to the point that we just lose that rear edge in behind the window. I will then scale it alone on the x-axis until it is the width of the window. And I can move it down a little bit so that we get a better split between these windows. Now this mesh has geometry that is also wasted in the form of polygons or faces that can't be seen. Here, the side, the back, and the other side all can't be seen from the front where we will see this piece of geometry. So I'll hit the delete key on my keyboard to remove those. Finally, I will select my main window, and holding Shift, I will add the new bar to it, and I can use the combine button to join these into a single piece of geometry. At this point, I can call this one section of wall done. There's enough modeling here that I can see what this thing is, and I can see the shape that it is going to give me. Inside of a game engine, this is going to be enough to construct the engine, construct the building. I'm going to open up the outliner. And in the outliner, we're going to have to give this object a name. Currently, it is called Plane 2. There are also two other objects in the world here, something called Plane 1 and something called Cube 1. Now, these are holdovers from the geometry that was originally created to make this piece of geometry. These are kind of nodes in history, looking back in time at when this object was created. In order to remove these, I'm going to select my plane, and I'm going to go and use this little icon here to delete the history. Alternatively, we could go into the Edit, Delete by Type, History, and that will remove any historical reference in the software to how this object was created. Now, we can go and rename it wall windows _ 01. And I now have the first of my modular pieces. The next thing that I want to do is create the section of window that has the little trim along the bottom. So I'm going to clone this, and I will start creating the next window. This mesh needs to remain at 0, 0, 0 upon export. If you look at where my pivot currently is, it's in the center of the geometry. And we could, if we wanted to, go and manipulate the pivot and snap it down to 0, 0, 0, like this. We can go and turn on our vertex snap and snap it there. And now this object actually is rooted in 0, 0, 0. The reason I want to do this is that I have to move it so that I can create my duplicate. So I'm going to hit Control D, and I'm going to make sure it's wall windows 1 that I have, and we'll go move it back. Let's turn the snap off, away from the grid. Now, it doesn't matter in which direction you move it, only that it gets moved away. The next thing that I want to do is add that extrusion at the bottom of this window to make it a separate piece from the original one. This has been named correctly just in its creation, and so I don't have to do anything with that. To create that lip, I'm going to select the two vertices at the bottom of this mesh that are currently sitting at 0 in Y, and I'm going to move them up. I'll move them up to about 12. This is going to create a gap between this mesh and the bottom of the world. I can select the bottom edge and holding Shift, drag it down. This I will put at 0 in Y, placing it back where it was originally. Then I will grab this face, extrude it, and I think I'll give it a thickness of 12. That way, its thickness matches the height that it has as well. With that done, I can remove the side polygons that are never going to be seen. I can delete the history of this object, and Wall Windows 2 is done. Now, if I want to see how these two objects are going to snap together when I place them in the world, I can turn back on my pixel snap, or vertex snap, and I can go and snap this one above the first, and we can see that this is going to give us what we see in the image. A wall, directly above it, another wall with a lip separating the two. I'll hit undo and turn off my snaps so that this goes back to the way it was. Now, in the original building, there are two sets of this wall with this one in between. This is the first story, the second story, and then a copy of this is the third story. Now, I don't need to make that third story because it is just a clone of this. However, to ensure that I don't leave any pieces out, it may be in my best interest to make copies of these over somewhere else in the world and start to ensure that I do have everything I need to make my building. So I can go and snap this one up here, and we'll make a copy of this one that I'll snap up there, and I can now see my first, second, and third story. Okay, so far so good. We're now up to 2 unique pieces. Next, we can go and make the basement story. The basement story, and I'll turn off my vertex snap and move both of these back. My basement story is going to be very similar to this, but the window therein is going to be arched. I'm going to begin by taking this mesh with the trim at the bottom, because that'll look good on the ground, and I'll make a clone of it as well. We'll make sure that the clone is at the origin. And now we can remove the window that exists here and go and create the arched windows that should be there. There should be 2 of them. Now, in order to get rid of this window, I'm simply going to delete the polygons that run between the window and the wall. And delete. I can now double click on the internal structure and hit delete as well. This will get rid of anything that's in there. For this mesh, I'm going to need to split this window in 2 and then arc it as well. I think for design purposes, because my walls are a little bit thinner, I'm going to create just a single arch in here. To do that, I'll grab my vertices that make up the hole. I'll switch to scale and I'll just bring them in a little bit. Now it looks like something is not welded here. So I'll select all my vertices and I'll go to Mesh. And we will go to, sorry, not Mesh, Edit Mesh and Merge, and just ensure that those have been merged together. I'm going to need to make sure in the other pieces of geometry too that that is not the case, that there is not something extra in there. So here are these 4. I'm going to bring them in, and then this is where I'm going to create my arch here. So I'm going to create the arch first because I think that'll be the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to start off by grabbing these 2 vertices, and let's go and give them a bevel and see how this works. So not well. It looks like it's trying to bevel, but we're getting a little bit of an artifact here. So I'm going to hit undo until that's done. Let's see if we can extrude these vertices. Now it looks like it's doing exactly the same thing. So that's not going to work. Yeah, it looks like all of the tools that we have at our disposal are going to split this in a way that isn't going to be ideal. So we'll use the tools that we have and we'll make do. I will go and bevel this. Once the bevel is done, I will select the corner vertices and I'll scale them in and move them down until we've got a little bit more of that arch here. Now again, we're trying to make sure that this remains fairly low poly. So I'm going to use the connect tool here. And then I'll use the target weld, bring these out. Again, trying to minimize how much wasted topology we have. Now that I have this, I can select the edges and double click. That will select the entire hole. I'll hold shift and drag it back. And then we can go and bridge. First, I'll remove the top and bottom so that I have 3 and 3. And if I go to bridge, it'll bridge across the hole. Now, this was meant to be the basement story, which means it has to be lower in terms of its height. So that is exactly what I'm going to do here. Grabbing the top 2 vertices and switching to move, I'll make sure the height is at 200. And now we can see that that's actually gone below the arch of the window. So I'll grab the vertices from the arch and I'll bring them down like so. Now, at this point, the window's looking pretty short and squat, which is not really what I wanted. And I would have preferred this to actually look a little bit better. So watch this. I'm going to select the arched window and I'm going to scale it in until it's a little bit thinner. Maybe something like that. Then I'm going to clone this piece, holding shift and dragging. I will turn on my vertice snaps and we will snap it to the piece beside it. It's not too bad. And my goal here is to combine these. This is going to make one piece out of these 2. I'm going to select all of the vertices on this object, and I'm going to head to Edit Mesh and Merge, just to ensure that I don't have any gaps in here anywhere, or that there aren't any doubled up vertices. And then in Object Mode, I'm going to go to Scale, and in X, I'm going to scale this to 0.5. That's going to narrow this out so that it matches the dimensions of the original. I will delete the history, freeze its transformations, and now we can go place this back at the origin. I'm not liking the shape of the windows, but that's easily fixed. We can go and edit our pivot point, snap it, and then we can go and place the object at 0 so that it's back where it goes, and it should be exactly where it was originally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and scale these windows again. So I'm going to scale just the top arch, make it rounded again. And that works a little bit better for me. So there's now our basement piece. And again, we can go and test to see how this is working in our window or in our building. I'm going to move it over here. We'll grab all of these and I will move them up. Let's undo that. Start with this one. And then we'll do this one. And then we'll do this one. And there. We're now getting that building looking kind of the way it does in the image. All right. So far, so good. Now, these don't count as part of my modular set. These do. And I'm already at 3. Let's go and make the corner of the building now that is going to come out from here and move along this edge. Now this is going to be pretty easy. I actually have 3 different ones that I need to create, one for each of these windows. To do this, we're going to move these guys back again. Let's turn off that snap. And let's move these away from the origin. And I'll make a clone and put it at the origin. Like so. Let's zero this out. And what I need to do now is I need to make a duplicate of this that has been rotated. So I'm going to hold J and Shift, and I will rotate this. Let's do this in the right order. Hold Shift and J and rotate this 90 degrees. That way there are 2 of them. I'm going to edit my pivot and place it in the first point. And I'll move this back here. So now we can see that that corner is matching what we want. The next thing that I need to do is remove what I don't need. And that's going to be pretty easy. That's everything here. So we're going to combine these 2 together. We will go into polygons, and I can delete everything beyond that corner, which includes these guys. And I'll do the same thing on this side. Delete everything that is not a part of that corner, like this. And I now have this corner ready to go. So we'll grab these 2 vertices. That height is 250. These vertices should be at 0. And I now have a corner. It's not the right dimensions yet, though. That's easy enough to do. Let's also go and make sure that Edit Mesh, Merge, is done. So we have 6 vertices, 3 atop, 3 below. And I'll grab these 2 vertices, and we need to move them in X. Right now, they find themselves at negative 41. I'm going to do negative 100. And then I'll grab these 2, which are going to move themselves in Z, and I'll put them at negative 100. I now have my first corner. I'm going to grab these things and make sure that their history is all gone. We'll go and rename this corner underscore 01. Let's try that again. Corner underscore 01. There we are. So I now have a corner piece. We need to move its pivot. So right now, the way that this is structured, its pivot point is of no use to us over here in the center. And where it touches the origin is of no use to us. Again, each of these meshes has its pivot point at that bottom right-hand corner. Well, when I go to snap this mesh, I need to make sure that that point snaps to that point. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing the right side of this window, which technically is what I've made, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. And now I will grab its pivot. We'll snap it to the vertex. So I'll move it down here. And then we can zero this out. Now I should be able to snap this to this building and complete that section of wall. In the engine, I'll be able to mirror this to snap it to this side. So we now have our first bit of corner. The other bit of corners that we need to have this lip built into them. Well, that was pretty easy. If you recall, I used 12 centimeters. So I will grab my vertices at the bottom and in Y, move them up 12. I will grab my edges. Holding Shift, I will drop them down. Let's undo that and turn off the snaps. And holding Shift, we'll drag that down and put it at 0. We will grab the 2 faces and we will extrude them. We will go to Offset and we will, thickness rather. And we will move them out a total of 12. So that it matches. Another really good reason to use numbers that you're paying attention to. Now it looks like it's actually skewing on us here when we're doing this. So I'm going to undo that and let's try the thickness here at 12. And now we have nice, stable corners. Excellent. I will go and delete what is not seen. In this case, the two ends. And now that is corner number 2. Now it looks like I didn't actually clone this to take corner number 1, so we'll do this again. So this one's corner 2, and in corner 1, which I accidentally overwrote, we'll go and delete these and put this back down to 0. And there's corner 1. There's corner 2. And corner 3 is for the basement. I'll go and place this at 0s. Like so. And the basement just needs its height adjusted. So if I grab these, drop them down to 2 meters, there is now corner 3. And I can go move this over here. So beautiful. We are now at 6 pieces. This is kind of how this goes. You just keep adding as you see fit, as you need to create these pieces. And it just keeps kind of building from there. So I go and add another window. I go and add another trim. I go and add another piece. We have a section here that requires, if I move this back over again, we have a section here that requires 2 arched windows, which I can make out of this. And I can add that arch over top, right? We've got 2 windows here. So I can do that out of the 2 window section. We've got a section here that requires 5 windows with some brick in between. Again, I can use what I have modeled and I can extend it to do that. Let's take a look at that here. Let's go make this indigo colored one here, which is the same as this section here that's green, but there are 5 windows instead of 3. Well, if I go back into Maya, that's this piece here, which I will clone over here. And what we need to do with this is make this a segment of 5 windows and not 3. Well, doing 5 windows is going to be pretty easy. I just need to clone this right side along that center line. So let's go see if we can mirror this and make that work. First, I'm going to go bring it to the origin. And I need to find out where that other window is, that last window where I want to be the new center. So this in X is at -2218. So I'm going to copy that number. And let's see what we can do about now mirroring this object. I'm going to go use the mirror button. And we can now go start configuring this. So first, we want to change our axes. You can see that as we move this around here, we can get this. And I'm going to go and place that number in the offset, like so, and hit enter. And that has now given us a wall with 5 windows. I'll delete its history, and I'll clean it up. Again, there's some wasted topology here. We'll go to target weld. And we'll just snap these out so that we don't have any n-sided polygons. And there is now a 5-sided version of that window. This is now not wall 10, but wall 1, 2, 3, 4. So this wall here, we can delete these guys. These are not helpful anymore. Let's go and rename this one wall 4. Now, what's really cool about this is that this wall has now given us the width of our next section. So if I grab these vertices here and I look at their position inside of X, -444.36. So again, not ideal in where it's been positioned, but in this case, that's what we're going to be using, because that is where double of where that window ended up being. So the downside of using odd numbers. Now again, all of my corner pieces would fit on this. If we turn on a vertex snap and I bring this guy over here, where are you? Like this, you'll see that this snaps onto that piece just as well as it did the other piece. So that works quite well. We can do the same thing here with the bottom. Again, I know that I need to make a clone of this in order to make the duplicate. I'll hold shift and drag this forward. I know that I'm going to put symmetry on here. So we'll go and put that mirror in. And again, I'll go and paste that number in the mirror. Like that. And that'll give me the next window. So we can do that. And this one doesn't need that center edge at all. It's actually not contributing to anything. So I'm going to hold Control and Backspace to remove it. And just like that, we've now got the right width for the basement. And this one should be 05. So you can see how very quick and easy it is to do this when you start putting these together here. We're going to go and delete all of the history. So there's something else in here. We're going to go and delete that guy. And we want to make sure that everything is named accurately and everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing and that they're all fitting together and able to make us this building. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. So we're well underway here. We can actually start making our columns and all of those things. I think I will do one more demonstration here in doing the column piece, and then we can go and call this video a wrap. So the column is going to be this central piece here. And in order to make this, I actually need to have a little bit of my model put together already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these things and I'm going to move them back. I'm ensuring my snaps are not on. And I need to create basement, first floor, second floor, third floor. And it doesn't matter which of these I use. I'm just going to go bring the basement up. And I will put my snaps on now. And we'll go and move this to the, well, let's do the grid snaps here. Actually, let's just zero it out. There we go. Then we'll put on our vertex snaps for the next one. So there's the basement with the arched windows. I'm going to grab the first floor and holding Shift, we'll make a copy. And I'll move the copy up here. I'll grab the one with the trim, which is our second floor, and holding Shift, I'll drag a copy and move it up. I'll grab the first floor and clone it. And there is now the basement, first, second, and third floors. Now this is where I need to actually go and create the piece that's going to live in between them. To do this, I'm going to start off by making a box. We'll go and zoom in on that box. I believe I want this thing to be 50 by 50. So I will go into its setup and we will go change it to be 50 by 50 by 50. So it's half a meter. That works pretty well like that. I think I'm actually going to make it a little bit wider. Well, we'll leave it like that. Let's go take a look here. So we're going to go into vertice mode, and I'll put these guys on the ground. This is going to become 0. I will grab the top ones, and let's turn off our snaps here so they don't interfere. And I essentially want to bring this all the way up to that third story. So if I go and look at the height here, that height is 700. So that makes it pretty easy to go and put these in the right place. So we'll put 700 in. That's 7,000. There we go, 700. Okay. And then I need to make the little decorative part that goes on top. I can also go and take all of these vertices and zero out their Z position. And we can delete that back face and the bottom face. Okay, so we've got our first little bit of this working. What I'm going to do now is go and create that upper bit. I'm going to go back into Photoshop here. I just want to zoom in and see what it actually looks like before I go in and model it. So we'll take this piece here and let's go run an extrude on it. And I'm going to bring it up to about here. And then we are going to run an extrude again, and I will scale this part in, and we'll move it up a little bit, and then I'll extrude it up again. And I'm just kind of trying to match what's in the image here. And I'm not going crazy accurate with this. I just kind of need it to be close enough. And so I'll grab this edge and bring this back, and bring it down a little bit so that we have something a little bit decorative. The other thing that it's got is that this little bit of trim here sticks out. So we'll go and extrude, and we'll give this a little bit of thickness. If you hold Control while dragging your thickness here, you have a little bit more of a finer level of control over how wide it gets. So we're going to go and delete all of the back facing sides of this, which aren't technically doing anything. And just like that, we've now got our column. So I can go and delete now all of these pieces. No, I want this. And we can go back to this guy with move. And again, we're going to want to snap that pivot point. And then we're going to want to make sure that this thing lives at 0, 0, 0 when we export it. Okay, and this can be column 1. Underscore 1. And I now have a 3-story version of that column. The really cool thing is that we can also drop this down to make the shorter version that needed to exist as well. That shorter version just needed to run the height of 200. So if I take this and clone it, let's go put the clone back up here. And we drag these guys so that they are below the 200 mark. Let's see this. We are at 194. So I'm going to go just a little bit lower. And that piece now would actually fit against the basement windows if we wanted to have just some trim back there. So you can see that'll work with those. So again, I'll go put this back here. And we're, again, kind of continuing along. And this is kind of the idea. You kind of keep rinsing and repeating here. You create another piece, you create another piece, you create another piece. You know, I've got to make one of these 5 window sections with an arch across the top. And that then makes that different. I need a piece that's actually going to go on top of this. Here, if we do this, I need a piece without the windows. And so, again, I can go and grab all of these shapes here, all of these faces that are contributing to the width of the windows. Like that, and delete them. Followed by, missed something, there it is. Followed by deleting the windows. And then we can go and just take all of these vertices here and we can target weld them. So I'm going to go to target weld, and I will bring this forward. Looks like there was another face there. I'll have to go and double check that that's cleaned up on all of these. And I'll pull that up. And I can go into my edges here and just remove that and remove this one. And I now have that blank section of wall that's going to go on the top. So again, if this had vertices turned on and I dragged it down into the right area, there's where the roof of this structure comes in. Now the roof of this actually does have another bit of trim along here, and so this is something else I'm going to need to go and make. So if I zero this out and we go look at it, I need to create another edge through here. Yeah, we can do that. We can connect those. And we'll just turn the segments down to 1 and hit enter. And then let's see, I want the height of this to be 200. And we'll take this one and we'll set it to 150, giving me a 0.5 meter lip along the top. I don't think that's small enough. Let's go a little smaller, 175. There we go. And again, I'll use a little bit of an extrusion. I like that thickness of 12. Keeps things a little consistent. And we can go and delete these side faces. And there, we now have the piece that's going to be along the top. And again, I can clone this to make the one that's going to be, let's get rid of that snap. Move this back. Let's take our window like this and zero it out. I'll take the piece that I did that just has some trim here and we'll duplicate it. I'll turn the snaps back on so we can place it atop of this guy. There's my snaps. Like that. We know that these vertices have to be at -300 to make this the right width. And this piece actually has a peak. So if I grab this and connect, I can hit enter. I can grab these vertices, turn off my snaps, and move them up until that peak is correct. And again, this will now fit along with that piece. I need to make a corner to go around the corner as well, but you can kind of see the process here in doing this. It really doesn't take much once you start kind of getting into the flow of this. We're going to go to Edit Mesh and Merge just to make sure that there are no additional vertices. And yeah, you can see that it really doesn't take long once you start putting this together. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm near halfway done, and all I've done is just the singular corner of this building. And that's without the actual corner piece that would go in here. And so it is a pretty easy thing to accomplish. You just need to kind of keep rinse and repeating, creating all of these pieces, making sure that they are all named accurately, making sure that they are all transform reset, and that their pivots are all in a place when you hit move here, that their pivots are all in a place that's going to allow us to snap them together in a way that's going to allow us to create this building in Engine. That brings us to an end here, and I hope this has been helpful. And until next time, we'll see you later.